evening and welcome to Capital Connection, where we join the dots for the big picture of business in Africa. I'm Godfrey Mutizwa. On the agenda today, Mozambique's 2,470-kilometer coastline fronts the warm waters of the Indian Ocean and makes the country particularly vulnerable to cyclone events, especially in the age of man-made climate change. Cyclone Idai made landfall on Thursday last week near the port city of Beira and sowed havoc. The final death toll from Idai is expected to be in the thousands. The United Nations is describing Idai as maybe the worst ever natural disaster to strike the southern hemisphere. Be assured, Cyclone Idai will leave in its wake humanitarian, economic and political consequences. And we are asking, is Mozambique's development of its offshore natural gas reserves in jeopardy from climate change? But first, Africa's richest woman, Isabel dos Santos, the daughter of former Angolan President José Eduardo dos Santos, amassed a fortune during her father's almost four-decade rule. She is worth about $2 billion. But since João Lourenço assumed the Angolan presidency in September 2017, Isabel's fortune is increasingly coming under scrutiny. Joining me via the phone from Cape Town is Matthew Kindinger, a senior Sub-Saharan Africa analyst for the business intelligence consultancy Dhaka Francha. Welcome, Matthew. Is Isabel's fortune under threat? And I guess the wider question is it her own, given she may have stolen it from the people of Angola?
Well, I wouldn't be able to speculate on whether Isabel dos Santos' fortune is under threat. But what I could say is that Isabel dos Santos and other influential people in Angola and have influence in state-owned companies in Angola probably will face a bit more scrutiny or continue to face scrutiny in terms of their involvement in big companies in Angola. And this is a reflection of the government's increased drive to tackle corruption in recent, over the last couple of years.
Yeah, but could her ability to hold on to that fortune be tied into perhaps the political influence that her father exercises beyond the time that he spent as president?
So yeah, that's an interesting question. It's a bit unclear to what extent they will be able to continue to exercise influence and hold on to these large fortunes, as you mentioned. But I think it's unlikely at the moment that the government and Mr. Lourenço is going to go after specific individuals directly.
Yeah.
I think the government at the moment is much more interested at reducing overall levels of corruption and privatizing state-owned enterprises, for example.
But could Portugal be after her as well? Because we do know that she's got assets in both Angola and Portugal, right?
I'm sorry, could you repeat the question?
I was asking if the Portuguese government could go after her assets as well, if there are questions around the legitimacy of how she came to be the owner of those assets.
Oh, I'm sorry, I wouldn't be able to comment on that.
Okay, all right. Now, the other day we heard that she has been ousted from the helm of the telecommunications company in Angola. Apparently, this was on Tuesday. Shareholders discussed corporate governance, and there perhaps was a suggestion that she wasn't suitable.
Well, so I think it's very interesting that this is happening at the moment, and this is because the government is under a lot of scrutiny to increase corporate governance standards in state-owned enterprises. You'll probably see this occur in other state-owned enterprises as well, notably Sonangol, other state-owned companies like the national airline as well.
Do you see her surviving all of these threats? I was just asking the question if you see her being able to survive all these threats and be able to remain as perhaps the richest woman in Africa, as we have been alluding to.
So I wouldn't be able to comment directly on Isabel dos Santos' position, but I would say that she is, well, the dos Santos are likely to continue to maintain their position in many respects. But what I would say is from the perspective of Angola, I would say what is more interesting is that investment opportunities are going to continue to arise as the government tries to reform these organizations that have a lot of government influence.
And the efforts that we've been seeing the new government undertaken in Angola to try to make the place a little more investable, do you see those bearing fruit?
So in terms of the economic reforms, they are slowly beginning to bear fruit in Angola. Unfortunately, investors still are not wholly convinced or not fully convinced that economic reform and liberalization will mean that there are significantly improved opportunities in the market. But nonetheless, things are moving in the right direction.
Yeah, critical. What needs to be done, though, because we have seen the government drive against corruption.
I'm sorry, could you repeat the question?
I just wanted very specific, concrete suggestions you have that need to be undertaken by the Angolan government to make the place attractive for investment.
Oh, so yes, there are a number of things that the government is doing. So that is including broadening the tax base. So the government is introducing things like a value-added tax, which will mean that the country's reliance on oil will hopefully decrease over time. It's also privatizing a number of state-owned enterprises. So a number of industries, such as light manufacturing, the aviation industry, and a number of other industries are all being selected for privatization. So this does create opportunity for companies to invest and for investors to develop their businesses in Angola. There's also been some positive developments in the foreign currency or the foreign exchange regime. So there's a continued depreciation of the kwanza, which is helping access to foreign currency, albeit very slowly.
So they are making effort. What about support from the IMF? Do you see that continuing?
Yes. So the engagement with the IMF, this extended fund facility, is a very positive development, and this is because it provides government finances with more resources, so it means that the government has more capacity to spend and invest. It also means that foreign investors are likely to view this engagement with the IMF quite positively. Mr. Lorenzo has stated that he's very keen on engaging with international organizations like the IMF, so I expect this to continue for the next couple of years.
Okay, that's Matthew Kindinger. Thank you. He's a senior Sub-Saharan Africa analyst for the business intelligence company Dakar Francha. Now, Cyclone Idai's impact is being felt across Mozambique, Zimbabwe and Malawi. Cyclones are a common occurrence for Mozambique, of course, as we all remember, but both their intensity and frequency appears to be increasing. So the question we're asking is, will the weather undermine Mozambique's development of its prized offshore natural gas reserves? Joining me now to discuss this is energy expert at the legal company Hogan Lovell. His name is Charles Marais. Thank you, Charles. So I want to put those two words together, intensity and frequency. Are we seeing a recurrence of both?
Look, one of the questions that we looked at was, are the cyclones likely to impact on the reserves? And the answer is probably not.
The reserves are underground, of course.
And they've been there for hundreds of millions of years, if not billions of years. And if you have an average of one cyclone per year, it's been subject to hundreds of millions of cyclones. So the reserves won't be impacted by the cyclones. But what would be impacted is possibly the exploitation of the reserves that they've discovered.
Right. What about the frequency? Is the other question we're asking, isn't it? Are we seeing that time where there's just an increasing amount of cyclones, and therefore we should be preparing for such?
Yeah, that's a climate change issue, isn't it?
Yeah.
I think we might be seeing a greater frequency, but I think the important thing is, can we anticipate where they're actually going to hit the continent?
Yes.
So, you know, the question of how often will we see a cyclone where the reserves are, that's a bit more speculative. But I think one can say that there probably are going to be more.
Okay. Let's clarify this other side of my question, the issue around the intensity of them. I have heard a description of this cyclone, the last one, as one of, in fact, as the worst that has hit Southern Africa. Again, could we be talking about an increase in intensity of the cyclones and therefore the capacity for greater destruction?
I think you need to understand what intensity means. You know, sometimes you measure it in terms of human casualties and sometimes wind speeds and so forth. So I really don't know to what extent they are actually increasing in intensity.
Yeah.
But I think there seems to be a general opinion that cyclones are increasing in intensity, and some people attribute that to climate change.
What about the risk to installations, which is the bigger worry?
That's a different story. One must realize that these installations are pretty far off the coastal shelf, off the coastline, in very, very deep water. I think the reserves that have been discovered off Mozambique are something like 3.9 to 4 kilometers under the surface. Whoa. So that's a long way down. So you need to build kit that is very, very robust and can withstand adverse weather. But this is not new. I think if you look back to the 1950s, in the North Sea, when they first started exploiting the oil discoveries there, they have extreme weather there. So I think the technology probably exists where you can rest assured that the installations can withstand the weather, but I think they probably have to evacuate crew off the installations.
Yeah, so we're talking offshore. What about onshore? Because the picture that's been painted for us is that what you have seen is a blanketing, if you like, of large areas around the port of Beira, as well as inside into Mozambique. So the question that naturally arises is around your infrastructure for the gas field, so your pipelines and depots, etc.
Yes, I think they would be subject to normal weather conditions anyway. Sometimes they will be severe. Generally speaking, when a cyclone hits land, it tends to reduce in intensity. So it depends on how far inshore you have your main installations. But again, you know, there's a weather pattern that one can look at. And one can look at the extremes and say we will build for the extremes, or we will simply build for something which is perhaps a little less extreme, and then rely on things like insurance to rehabilitate.
Yeah, but could this be safe as a result of this, after this cyclone, do you think?
Look, I think people need to look forward and decide how they're going to encounter these, possibly because of intense...
but it is a risk.
It's always a risk. It's always a risk, yes.
Yeah. The other risk, stepping away from the weather issues that we have seen, is the alleged Islamist insurgency around the Cabo Delgado province. How much a risk do you think this is? Have you been able to get any kind of insights?
No idea. No idea.
Okay. All right. Let's leave it there. Thank you, Charles, for coming in.
Thank you very much.
Okay, that's Charles Marais. He's an energy expert with Hogan Lovell. Now, coming up after the break, I'll have an assessment from a senior United Nations representative of Cyclone Idai's impact on one of the world's poorest regions. Welcome back. Now, the destructive power of Cyclone Idai is immense. It has laid waste 90% of Mozambique's port city of Beira and torn through neighboring Zimbabwe and Malawi. Joining me in the studio is Lola Castro. She's the UN's World Food Programme's Regional Director for Southern Africa and the Indian Ocean states. In her 25 years working for the World Food Programme, she says she has worked in multiple countries, including a 4-year stint as the World Food Programme's Mozambique representative and country director from 2009 through to 2013. Okay, thanks very much, Lola. After that brief history, I think all of us are just wondering just how bad this is.
If you want in one word, it's very, very bad and devastating.
And when you talk about very, very bad, help me understand, because obviously from the media perspective, we sort of focus on the big numbers, your number of people affected, your number of people killed, destruction of infrastructure, food availability, etc., etc.
Good. Just to tell you, when the Cyclone Idai hit, there was a very good preparedness by the government of Mozambique, the communities, there was evacuation, there was early warning, there was a lot of things. But the cyclone really hit very hard. Wind, water, surge from the sea, the waters coming from the river flooded because of the rains, as well as the heavy winds. When you have this combination of 4 factors, it is very bad. And also it took a path. The path of the cyclone, it was basically in a very, very highly populated area, which is what we commonly call the Beira corridor. It's the corridor that goes from Beira, goes into Nyamatanda, Chimoio in Manica province already, Mozambique, and goes into the Chimani Mountains towards Mutare in Zimbabwe. Right. So it takes this very populated corridor, and it basically devastates the whole area because of winds, rain, and water. These are very low-lying areas at the beginning in the flat plains. So basically, in that corridor, the estimation is 1.7 million people.
Sure.
So
who are affected?
The official figure from the government at this moment is 600,000. But the government is working with the international community to really assess the damage and assess the number of population affected. At this moment, 400,000 people seems to be displaced already. So obviously the numbers will be very close to the 1.7 million that are in the path of the cyclone.
Is that 1.7 million for Mozambique, or does that include Malawi and Zimbabwe?
That's Mozambique. In Malawi, we have also we had the rains of Malawi were the predecessors of the Cyclone Idai. On the 1st of March, we start having very, very heavy rains. And these heavy rains fall and they start filling the rivers. And as you know, the Shire River, which goes into the Zambezi Zambeze floods. That is another big area in Sanje, Chikwawa, Palombe districts of Mozambique, of Malawi, gets flooded. And that water flies down into the Zambeze.
Yes.
So we had also the Tete area of Zambeze, as well as the Zambezi area, Kelimane, Chinde, all those areas also flooded by those waters.
Right.
And Zimbabwe gets, basically, the cyclone hits the Chimanimane Mountains, as you know, the mountains that are lying in the border between Mozambique and Zimbabwe, hits these mountains and causes flash floods, high devastation with very rush running water through these slopes. Takes houses, people, livelihoods and lives.
Talk to us about the problems that you're facing as a result of all of this.
Well, food program, I mean, our added value, we work from Beira. We have an office in Beira and warehouses in Beira with food. Just to let you know, our warehouses flew away. But our teams were really on top of it. They covered the food so well and they hang it out to the ground so well that we are lucky. We have thousands of tons of food.
So the food is available
in the ground. Yeah, it was covered by plastic. We lost a small amount.
The challenge is to get to the people that have been affected.
Exactly. But now what we have done, we flew planes from Dubai. We brought additional high energy biscuits. These are the biscuits that people will eat when they are in these isolated areas. You give a small package so they can sustain themselves. They also need water. So we have managed to send that. In fact, the South African Air Force are helping because we have helicopters. South African Air Force has helicopters. The government has helicopters. So those helicopters fly into the areas. They bring out people and they distribute biscuits to the people who stay till they can be rescued, at least for life saving. But basically, the accesses are all locked. Beira is landlocked at this moment. The N6 is not working, the Kaya-Beira road. Port is semi-operational, and we are landing. We have managed to land, government and us, to land and bring food.
Right. No, so that's in terms of the food availability. What about the support that you require in terms of perhaps purchasing more food? Are you adequately covered? Have you gone to appeal for? Do you need assistance? That's the question that I'm trying to ask.
I mean, obviously,
how much do you need?
If you can imagine, initially, the government and the UN estimated 600,000 people affected in the whole provinces of Mozambique only. But now we are talking about potentially 1.5, 1.7 million affected in Mozambique, 900,000 in Malawi, around 15,000 in Zimbabwe. So that's already overshooted like 4 or 5 times the numbers we had.
We're talking 2.5, 2.6 million people.
2.5, 2.6. Then the resources we had on the ground were mostly for activities of development, etc. Now we have to change all gears. The area is flattened by the waters. When the water will recede, we'll see the reality. So we need much more money.
How much
we
do you
estimated 14 million last week. At this moment, WFP only is looking into almost 5 times, $60 to $100 million, because we need to put planes, helicopters, boats on the waters immediately. And we are already doing it. We have distributed to thousands of people already, but we need to scale up urgently. So yes, we need the funds.
Quickly, in terms of the support that you require, when you've gone out to ask for assistance, how hard, how difficult has it been to find the support that you require in this polarized world where nationalism seems to be taking center stage?
Look, what we have seen is an amazing regional response. I mean, the countries in the region, they all want to contribute.
They do?
For example, at this moment,
South
Africa, we have seen not only the helicopters, but also the civil society. We have the gift of the givers on the ground. We have a number of NGOs from South Africa. We have private sector like Ericsson and the Luxembourg government who have brought all the antennas, who have rehabilitated the communications there. We have planes who are flying in from private companies that also are supporting. So for us at the moment, look, if we can say, look, what do we need now urgently, and South Africa can help, private sector, boats. We need boats. We need boats that can navigate deltas of the rivers, and you have many here. We need additional air operations to be able to move the food, the water. People need water, food, shelter, blankets. It's not just about food. People need everything else, and that's extremely important. And there is where everybody can chip in. The government of South Africa, DIRCO, has launched an appeal to the society on 17th of the month, and we really appreciate, because it's also helping us to really do more.
I wonder, though, at your level, if you're able to see who's contributing. I raise this point because we keep talking about how our own people should be able to help help our own people. And we've got billionaires in Southern Africa, and I know names, and I really wonder whether you often see help coming from those big names that we have in the region.
I don't have the details,
and the Dos Santos.
I obviously don't have the details, but we know that there is a lot of private sector contribution. I cannot give you the details because I don't have them in front of me.
Don't worry, I'm going to chase them in. I'm trying to make sure that they are going to contribute.
Thank you very much.
Food security in the months and years ahead. This is already a very poor region. Now there's come this devastation. Just how precarious does this make the situation on the ground?
I was checking with my colleagues how many hectares may be affected of land. And of course, it's not all arable land, but they're talking about 5.5 million hectares affected underwater. Some of them will have been covered by salt water because the salinization came. There was a huge tide wave that came from the sea.
Would
6
you call
to
it
7
a tsunami?
meters. No, it's not, because thank God there is still mangroves in the area. We need to keep our mangroves in the African coast to avoid the waves. Yeah, this is why. But it came up. It came up the river and it flooded areas. So that's one problem. Second problem, all the harvest that was planted about to be collected is lost in all that area. It has gone, it's underwater. And then they have lost also, you know, people keep their chickens, their goat. This is not a heavy cattle area like you may have in some areas of South Africa or southern Mozambique as well. They have a lot of cattle. But central Mozambique have cattle, but it's more the small, the goat, the cows, the goats, the chickens, the ducks. Those all have been
You've not been able to quantify this as yet?
It's not possible. At this moment, quantification is extremely difficult. Government is working very hard on assessment, international community, but at this moment, the priority is rescue. Rescue and sustain. You rescue people and you sustain the ones you leave behind with something, and then you continue rescuing.
How regular, sorry, I just wanted to pop in a question around these disasters that are coming from climate change. Should we just be preparing for the worst to come in the future? Is this the beginning of something?
To be honest, as we haven't done a full study if this is related to climate change or not, I don't want to comment on that. But obviously, this is one of the most hard cyclones we have seen hitting the Mozambican coast, or coming into the Mozambican channel and entering the coast. And taking that in consideration, I think a lot more of preparedness and community preparation is required.
Yeah, absolutely. Lola, thanks very much indeed for your time.
Thank you very much.
Okay, that's Lola Castro. She's with the World Food Programme, giving us a picture of the devastation that we have seen coming into Mozambique, Malawi, and Zimbabwe. And the number of people that have been affected, as you have heard, we're talking at the moment of 2.5, 2.6 million, but the devastation on the ground, the extent of it, still to be quantified. We shall try and keep on top of that story. And thank you again as well to my other guests on tonight's edition of Capital Connection. Join us again every Monday and Wednesday at 6:30 p.m. Central African Time. It's good night from me.